I'm Rob Downey, a family practice MD and Institute for Functional Medicine certified practitioner. I'm coming to you from Seaworthy Functional Medicine in Homer, Alaska. Seaworthy exists to help people overcome their health challenges and be fully vital. Today we are fortunate enough to have a stress expert, Dr. Heidi Hanna. Not that there's any stress in the world lately, but if there was, we'd certainly be prepared to explore it a little further today with her help. And so welcome, Dr. Hanna. Thanks for being here. What perfect timing.
No kidding. And we scheduled this before all of this happened, all of this stress swirling, as I like to call it. So it was good timing, and it's nice to have these discussions set up that are just supporting each other and having a conversation about life as we know it, knowing that that's always changing anyway. And we just kind of roll with it. But certainly people are much more heightened right now to, I think, stress in general, but just the dynamics and how different it affects different people and how it impacts our immune system and our perspective. So I'm sure we have a lot to unpack together.
Well, I'd like to start with a brief introduction, and I'll rely a little bit on some notes because your credentials are impressive, and I think it's nice for people to have a sense of where you're coming from. You're the Chief Energy Officer of Synergy Brain Fitness, company providing brain-based health and performance programs to individuals and organizations. You're part of a number of institutes and organizations, New York Times bestselling author on stress. You work with premier companies helping them like Google, Starbucks, Microsoft, etc. And you're a member of the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor. And apparently, you may not admit to being funny, but I already have evidence to the contrary because I saw a 4.5-minute posting of social distancing with you and your husband from about 5 days ago. And so if anybody needs a laugh today, I would encourage them to check that out. We cracked up here, me and my staff.
Thank you. Well, I'll tell you, just it goes to show what can happen, because I really didn't think I was funny. I thought I was funny in my own head, but I never would have done something like that. I'm someone that finds things funny, but I don't act funny, certainly not in public at least, and definitely not on social media. So that was interesting, but surrounding myself with this group and actually becoming a certified humor professional, I've learned the impact of humor on the brain, and I do ongoing research around a humor mindset. And I think this is one of those times in particular where I feel like that's actually the biggest strength that I have. With all the other research that I've done and all the other strategies, it's seeing the world through a lens that lets us play with our pain. And so no matter what comes up, as long as we laugh at what we do and not who we are, then we can minimize, the tension, we can improve our immune function. So I think it's always great to surround yourself with funny friends and humor homies. Even if it's not in person, you can still do it online, and it's very contagious.
Well, it may be one of the best things we do today is share some insights that we have from our careers that help folks. And so given that we could take days to explore the depth of your experience, I'll just flag it to people. When we get to the end, we'll want to chat about ways people connect with you and resources that you provide. But you do work around gender and healthy kids and stress. And so there's so many dimensions to your work. And I just thought, today, then, maybe our focus as we go through a few questions here about what stress is and how to deal with it or have it bring out the best in us, the blessings of adversity, as it were, is if we use that theme of what do we do when the intensification of the threat goes up. And I just thought I would segue in by sharing that I had a challenge my family and I faced about 5 years ago that was really high stakes. And so I remember saying to this person helping me, I remember sharing that I was stressed out or sort of flooded. And then the person said, well, that's not helping, being stressed out. And I sort of said, well, given the stakes, I don't know what else I could be. And then the person's response was, it's still not helping that you're stressed out. and so I had to kind of
Yeah.
reflect on that. And then, of course, it's the Institute for Functional Medicine Training and what I do day to day in my work. Often, I think medical providers get into this, the cobbler has no shoes phenomenon. And so I remembered a bunch of the things that I've learned about stress and allostatic load and all that stuff, but I don't want to steal your thunder. Anyway, I thought today if we could just start with what stress is and how people can have it bring out the best in them, even when it's intense, like the COVID-19 stuff that is messing with people's consciousness for sure.
For sure. And it's hitting on so many different levels. And even just in the, the short time you were talking, you hit on so many different facets that I'd love to unpack with you, and just trying to think of where to start. So let me start just by saying allostasis, allostatic load, because you brought it up. Normally I don't go straight there, but it is one of my favorite things. Bruce McEwen, unfortunately the late Bruce McEwen, was a friend and mentor of mine, and he passed away earlier this year. And he really came up with that kind of model. And most people, regardless of the depth of your training, understand this concept of homeostasis as balance. And so the body is constantly trying to get back to a state of balance. And of course, we talk about this idea of resilience as being able to bounce back to where we were before. Okay, that all makes sense. I'm going to say that's not at all what we want. And we want to think about it differently, and not actually managing stress, but mastering it so that we use it to fuel positive change. So even when you were just saying, was that helpful? And I sit back and I put on my psychologist hat, right? So my master's degree was in counseling psychology. I thought I was going to go into private practice, started working in that capacity and getting my licensure hours. And I just kept seeing all of these people struggling because their nutrition was bad, or because they weren't working out, or because they had these negative thought patterns. But even so many times, the negative thought patterns are being triggered by what's going on in our body first. And so that's really kind of what led me down this path of integrative neuroscience in particular. Was I started layering, first I did the nutrition and then exercise physiology. And then I paired up with an amazing research partner who has the world's largest standardized database of research. And so I get to ask questions, which is perfect for me because I'm really not that smart, but I ask great questions apparently. So we ask questions, we look at the database, we pull out some information. And some of the things I think will be helpful for people to understand are really, they're complex in the way it actually works in the brain and the nervous system, but so simple for a framework of understanding. And the biggest one is we're hardwired for safety. I know everyone knows that. We also operate probably 95 to 99% on non-conscious processing. So when we say, is the stress helping you and things like that, I think, well, is it? Yeah, if there's an emergency and you have to have more adrenaline, stress is the reaction that happens in the gap between demand and capacity. So if you're really in an emergency and the demand on your energy is more than you have, that adrenaline is great. It actually improves your immune function, gives you more sugar where you need it to your muscles, helps you to run out of the building or whatever it is. The problem is, in that situation, was it helpful? Did it allow you to take action and do something? Or was it hijacking your brain and getting you stuck in a negative, loop with your thinking or feeling overwhelmed? And it's those types of patterns, unfortunately, that over time get us stuck. And I always want people to understand that I come at this, by the way, from the inside out, because I struggled with anxiety and depression since I was 10 to 12 years old. And around the age of 12, I actually started fainting for a reason we couldn't identify at the time. And it wasn't really until in my 40s that I finally identified it as vasovagal syndrome, anxiety induced. So when you think of like fight or flight, that adrenaline rush that we need to kind of get out of the building, that is good, that is helpful, that will bridge the gap between demand and capacity as long as we take action within like 30 minutes. What happens when we keep thinking about it, or we feel overwhelmed, or we feel helpless, or we're stuck indoors, or we can't help the people that we see suffering when we walk out the door. I'm here in San Diego, I live downtown. There's a lot of people suffering. That's really hard for me as a highly sensitive person. So when we can't do something about it, that's when we really get into those cycles. And what happens is that initial anxiety oftentimes then turns into more of a freeze, faint, depression, burnout, exhaustion. And that's where I think most of the damage happens. That's where immune function goes down. And that's where we see the chronic wear and tear, as I'm sure you know. So to go back, and I realize this is a long answer.
No, this is great.
To go back to that. I could riff for hours on this topic. Obviously, it's my favorite thing to talk about. To go back to that, the simple definition I use that I think is really helpful for people is that stress is what happens in the gap between demand and capacity. So it could be physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, social, it could be financial, it could be kind of operational within the whole system, as you know, in functional medicine. So anytime that's off, that's what allostasis is it's the adaptation process. So if we go back to my original thought, is resilience what we want? And I could even ask you that question. Do we want to be resilient and go back to where we were? Or do we want to positively adapt to be better than we were before? And even studies of trauma show that people can have post-traumatic stress growth if the circumstances are right. And then we have to look at, well, what are those circumstances? It's not just look at things differently, put on rose-colored glasses if you just had a better mindset. So that's where I go back to your question again. Was stress helping you or hurting you in that situation? It depends. And for most people, it helps you just long enough to give you the rush and to get you feeling better. It's why we procrastinate to get things done, because actually we need the energy, especially in times like these. The problem is we're stuck inside, we're sitting still, that all rushes through our body. We don't take action within 30 minutes or less. And now it turns chronic. And now we've got that situation. And over time, unfortunately, that will hardwire new negative habits of thought and behavior. And now we really get stuck. And I'm sure that's what you work with. It's what I work with, is not telling people anything new most of the time, but helping them learn to bridge the gap between what they know and what they do. And even us, as you said, the cobbler in his shoes, right? We know what to do. Do we always do it that way? Probably not.
Yeah, I love what you're sharing, and I love knowing that people are going to have a chance to reflect on what we're talking about today. And sometimes I think that getting to do a lot of work in an area has to do with the novelty of the concept, and sometimes it has more to do with underscoring or highlighting aspects of a concept or sort of what's right in front of us. And conversation I have with a lot of my patients is this idea that acute stress to stress response you described. It's kind of what we would use in Alaska to run away from a brown bear. Yeah. And then we use that to pay our bills and get up in the morning and get geared up for a meeting. And that kind of using a screwdriver to turn a bolt type mismatch between acute distress response and our day-to-day challenges sort of is like having the throttle wide open, to use another metaphor. And then a lot of my patients kind of have the same question I did, which is like, well, if I want to be in this state of parasympathetic nervous system tone, rest and digest, rest and restore, etc., and get my frontal cortex running the show again, and not my midbrain, all that good stuff, get my adrenals to calm down, then they kind of ask how, and often we'll just take a deep breath together, and I'll say that peaceful feeling of that deep breath, that's your vagus nerve. Yeah. And then we'll kind of segue into, okay, now we want to expand that feeling into your flow state through the day. So as those things come up that make you feel like you're running away from a brown bear, you can sort of flow with them and be aware, but not sort of get swept into mind riot. That seems to be
I think there's, again, a couple points you bring up I'd love to just touch on. The first one being that most of the stress we deal with is not acute. It's not the bear, right? So it's the day-to-day grind and hustle and not feeling like we have enough or not feeling like we are enough. And I actually have done a survey. It's a Stress 360 framework that I've worked on, and I've been just mastering it over the last few years and getting all the evidence behind it. And we keep revising it, but it's essentially looking at the stress load, which is that allostatic load of demand versus capacity, but then also looking at stress lens, which is the perspective you have on all of that, which is mindset, non-conscious bias, those types of things. And then the stress signature, which is how it shows up what are the signs and symptoms that you experience first individually? Because actually, if you look at your symptoms or your signs, as I'm sure you would know, you're going to have a different pattern for somebody, say, who gets more headaches and muscle tension and is kind of more agitated, probably needs to get out and move and kind of release that high energy activation, versus somebody who's lethargic and maybe burnout or depressed and needs more nourishing and nurturing types of things like massage or meditation or essential oils. And of course, oils are great because they'll take you either direction. So I think that's one thing. In that survey, we've now looked at over 38,000 people. And I was really fascinated by what are the lifestyle things, the patterns that people are doing that are causing them the most stress. So everyone says they're stressed. No one can really define what it is. So what is it exactly? And I looked at finances, family, relationships, nutrition, sleep, exercise, all the things everyone assumes that it is. And the number one factor by far was feeling like there's not enough time to get it all done. And anytime I say that to an audience, it's like, oh yeah. So you wake up in the morning feeling like there's not enough time. You go to bed feeling like there's not enough time. And then you wake up and the first thing you do is, of course, check your cell phone, which tells you that you have more to do now. And so it's like that trigger is hijacking your brain. And that's my kind of the way I like to work with people on that is what's the circuit break that happens, right? Essentially, it's like Viktor Frankl's between stimulus and response is a gap. And it's in that gap, we have the choice to respond. What we're talking about is stress reactions. Those aren't stress responses. The response is, I felt that, I noticed that, that's telling me something. What's it telling me? And what am I going to do different? And to your point, you mentioned something about this earlier that made me think about this. If we didn't stress, like if we didn't care, we wouldn't stress. Mm-hmm. So that's another indicator. It's actually scarier, and especially for someone who's gone through bouts of depression off and on my whole life, it's much scarier to be depressed, because then I'm like, I can't believe I'm going to say this. I'm a really passionate person, but I don't care anymore. That's exhausting the whole stress reaction system, right? But if we notice the stress reactions happening and say, why is this happening? What is this trying to teach me? We get curious with our stress, then we can make even the smallest adjustments. So you mentioned breathing, and I want to come back to that for a second, because this is something actually a colleague of mine taught me I had never heard before, and it's been really helpful for me. Is so often, because we think of deep breathing and we'll say, take a deep breath. And I always struggled with that, because when I would be having a panic attack, that was always the first thing everyone would say is take a deep breath. And so that almost became like neurally cued with something really bad is going to happen in the brain. So that was like the first thing. But then I always thought, well, why doesn't that work for me? And it turns out, and I'm sure you know this as well, but I guarantee somebody here hasn't heard this before, is that when we breathe in, it's actually the sympathetic being aroused. And the sympathetic is the stress reaction. And it makes sense because we're consuming oxygen, we're increasing our heart rate, for that moment to push the oxygen out through our system. It's the exhale that's the parasympathetic. And so I remember talking to this colleague of mine, and he said, part of the problem is you say, take a deep breath, and it's like, and that's what people do first. And it's almost like over-activating. So what we actually want to have people do, even if they take a little breath, but not over inhale, but gently over exhale. So it's the extension. And you use words I love to use. I have people breathe in and just gently expand the feeling in their chest. So not over breathing. And actually doing that once we go through the whole brain recharge process of breathing, feeling, and focusing, which brings the brain back online. Then we start breathing in and expanding love and gratitude and kindness, and breathing out and extending those same things to others. So a slightly varied rate, and the research shows about 5 seconds in and about 5 to 6 seconds out is probably optimal for most people.
Oh, that's so wonderful having the specifics.
Yeah. I know. I love that kind of stuff too. It's like, it's real.
Yeah.
Some research out of Stanford not too long ago actually finally said just like our sleep patterns, there's a variance. So some people are going to be a little faster and a little slower. And I'm actually involved in a research study right now where we're evaluating a way to measure and help people find their optimal breathing rate. But we're also looking at sound cues and like exactly what tones. We know ocean waves help people calm their nervous system, but that, could we take those ocean waves, for example, and add on binaural beats and add on optimal rate breathing and actually see our heart rate variability get into that, resonant frequency faster, then we've really got something. Now it's like, for this specific person, here's the formula that's going to help you shift into that state more effectively. In the meantime, we just try a few things, try some different techniques. And I think tactical things work really well. That's why you see me do that. But having things we can, I have stones I can hold on to and little toys and all sorts of, things in my hand, just kind of as that gentle reminder as well of staying calm and staying grounded. So.
Thank you for all of those things. As you were talking, I then envisioned people hearing this and taking a little smaller, gentler breath in and a longer breath out, and more quickly experiencing that benefit that you and I want them to have, because we've both witnessed it so many times, as that person gets their eyes clearer and they appear more at ease and they're flowing. Mm-hmm. We know they can get there quicker. I was really struck reflecting this last year on sort of the amount of time I'd been doing functional medicine, and I got to thinking about, in college, I spent all this time teaching myself how to fly fish, and so I'd always go out and tangle up the fly line in Montana where I was going to college, and then years later I had a friend show me just a single thing about how to keep the rod tip moving a little bit off axis forward and back so the line didn't get tangled anymore. So then when I showed people how to do that, learning how to fly fish, I got rid of like the first 200 line tangles, which are the horrible frustration for the beginning fly angler. Yeah. And so one of the things that's so neat to me about a bunch of the state-of-the-art things happening that you're describing and that are happening in functional medicine is not only the progress into these domains that people are craving, a state of serenity and flow and resilience and confidence and capacity and engagement with the things that can be intimidating, but also that they can get there quicker. I think that's really good news.
Yeah, we have to get quick wins. I mean, the brain just is doing way too much work for it to keep working if it's not getting gains, really. So, I mean, we look at that a lot of like, what's a quick win that you can get? What's an imperfect action you can take that just says, look, I did something. It might not have been everything. And I think it's one of the great things about personalized medicine, about functional medicine, and what we're seeing in the integrative neuroscience space is that, everything as in medicine and research and everything really siloed. It's like all these new ideas and taking pieces and separating us. And now there's this real shift, thank goodness, to integration. So it's, what do I bring that then helps what you're bringing, and how would we blend those? So the example that comes to mind, the collaborators that I work with and that I teach with, we're doing a longitudinal study looking at brain health and performance. So it's essentially like the Framingham Heart Study was for heart health. We're doing that for brain health and performance with Harvard and Mass General Hospital and some just amazing, amazing team of people. So we're going to be able to bring these interventions in and really customize them with people and watch them and track them over the lifespan so that we can see what really works. And then, having conversations with that group, with the Global Stress Summit that I do. I mean, it's where I met Dr. Bruce McEwen, but also Dr. Stephen Porges, who to me is just a hero because he's the one that really helped us all understand the vagus nerve. And in fact, I'm speaking with him this weekend. We were just emailing today, and it's his wife's work on oxytocin and social bonding. And, you get these people now who may be very specialized, but I think many of us are starting to speak that same language and understand that we don't have to know everything about the human system to have these frameworks. And especially for the people we work with, you and I could go offline and get super nerdy and, cite studies and all of that, but it doesn't help anybody else. So how do we make it simple and practical and applicable so that they leave and get that win so that they're going to keep doing it?
Yeah, a lot of my patients come in now and they've got the pump is primed. I hear what you shared, and I think of this co-emergence of similar truths in multiple domains. So people are coming in and they're already using probiotics and leveraging their gut-brain connection, and then they want to work on their mindfulness or vice versa, or they've read that a bunch of the serotonin in the brain is made in their gut, or they notice as they start eating the phytonutrient spectrum that they're already feeling better by the time they get here. And so it really doesn't feel like starting from scratch now the way it did.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of
ago.
people, I would guess, especially in a field like yours, are fine-tuning at that point. So they're educated enough to know, I want to be better. You know, again, I don't want to be resilient. I want to be positively adaptable, or what I call pro-adaptable. So I want to get better and better and better. And that is good because they're coming in informed. We also know, I mean, we could spend all day just clarifying myths for people and, you know, letting them know not to overthink everything. And I would do presentations all the time about nutrition for optimal performance. And people would get into the weeds and they're asking me about things that I know a lot of people in our community love to talk about. And I think it's great. But I just would always go back to the facts, like, stress is going to kill you faster than stevia. So just have it, you know, or like organic, or, you know, just take a vitamin, you know, it doesn't have to be. And we know we can fine tune with people, but I think that goes back to that chronic stress overwhelm of, there's so much information out there. How do we filter what really works? And people don't often feel confident enough to know that they are the experiment. Like, if something doesn't feel good, I'm not advocating for diet soda by any means, so please don't hear me say that I am. That said, there are times and days where I want a diet soda, and I have one. And if I'm giving a presentation and people see me grab a diet soda, you would think that I just, you know, burst their bubble. And it's like, hey, you don't know the 99% of things I'm doing that are really good for me. And I'm doing this, and I do it every now and then, and it's kind of a treat. But even with that, there are certain sweeteners and certain sodas that give me a headache and make me kind of have a foggy memory. It turns out I don't do well with sucralose, so I avoid it. The cleaner you get your system, right, the more like in balance and in harmony you are, then you'll notice something and say, well, that didn't really feel good to me. That's your sign. Like, pay attention.
Yeah, I really want to add to what you're saying on that, because again, I think with people being really acutely stressed right now, this may be something really important to share, which is the person that illuminated it for me most recently, but I've seen it again and again from a bunch of the IFM faculty, is Dr. Dale Bredesen, when he illuminated that there's these 36 or so factors that lead to dementia. And then each person needs to flip a certain number of those factors, their direction. And for one person, it's 7, for another, it's 12. But no person with early cognitive impairment who's trying to get back to clear thinking has to go through item by item and do 36 things. Right. And I've seen in my practice some of these folks with early cognitive impairment that's going to lead to dementia if they don't reverse it. And now they're getting reversal a year or two into Dr. Bredesen's protocol. They're not flipping all 36 things. Instead, they're trusting that the body knows the way. They're getting into a flow state, and they do the high yield things first, and they let go of the stress to stress of trying to be perfect and do it for their body, as opposed to kind of trusting the gear to find the way and turn enough things the right direction.
Back again to the stress piece of it, right? So as soon as we get into perfectionistic thinking, all or nothing, all of that, every time I do a workshop or host a retreat, I always say at the end, please do not leave and do all of the things I just told you to do, because you're not going to do it. So just don't set yourself up that way. That's silly. And again, we have access to all of this information, so we put the pressure on ourselves that we have to do that. And I'm really glad that you make the point about cognitive decline and the symptoms, especially around brain health and performance, because, you know, as researchers in that space, there's never been a better time to take good care of your brain. And we now know, you know, the area I tend to kind of shape it around, I call brain fitness, because of my background as a, you know, exercise physiology personal trainers. People understand that. Like, they understand that we need to train our strength and our endurance and our flexibility. So if we think about the brain that way, we also need brain strength, and we need endurance, and we need flexibility. And we can train ourselves, especially as we're younger, proactively, to not have to deal with all of those things. But then we know we can also circuit break essentially those stress patterns. And there really is no time in the lifespan that you can't have a better brain. I'm sure you've seen this, and there's probably others here who have not heard this, that many people who have full-blown Alzheimer's disease never have a sign or symptom, and they end up dying of another cause. And for me, I've had 3 grandparents with Alzheimer's disease, so it's part of another reason that drove me into this. And the number one risk factor outside of age is chronic stress. Again, all those lifestyle things, how you eat, how you move, how you sleep, how you connect with people, all, if you do too much or too little, it's stress. And those hormones stimulate inflammation and plaque buildup. And so when people start to get worried about that, I always say the same thing again of, let's take a step back, let's take a breath, let's pay attention to what's going on, and what's the area that's most realistic for you right now to make a change. Let's get a couple wins going, and then let's look at that, because if people get motivated by doing something well, then usually they're willing to kind of hang in there and try the next thing and the next thing. So
process.
Yeah.
I flashed on something while you were talking, which is one of my favorite books, is The River Why by David James Duncan. It's from years and years ago, and it's about, it's fiction, and one character is this young fisherman and the other is this philosopher. And so the two end up teaching one another. The philosopher teaches the fisherman teaches the philosopher, and both of them are very inept at the other's skill set. And so Gus, the fisherman, he ends up with this stack of 25 books from Titus's library, right? And they're all philosophy. And then so he has that overwhelm moment of, well, now I've got these 25 books I've got to go read. And so he asks the philosopher, he says, well, how do I prioritize? And then the philosopher says, well, philosophos is love of knowledge. And so pick the books up, and the ones that you love, that have that magnetism, that sense of energy in your hand, or the first words leap off the page, or you find a sentence in there that moves you, then just go ahead and jump in and go. You don't need to read all 25 to move forward. You need to read one of them that you love, or a chapter from one that you love. And it really stayed with me over the years. And it also sort of fits into something else you shared, which is when people get moving, there's sort of fatalism that they're stuck, that I find kind of diminishes as well. They have this sense of movement forward, which turns into what can feel like self-defeating spirals and turn into self-improving spirals. And it also almost can seem a little magical for some people, though it isn't magic, but they start having more and more wins and successes because there's just all of that opportunity opening up. They're seeing 15 feet out in front of them rather than 6 inches from their
and I think even just the idea of movement, right? I mean, I know what you meant was moving and like making progress. And I would say absolutely, if we can see that we have some element of control, because there's a lot we can't control. And people now are like, well, we're not in control. And I'm sure you want to say this as much as I do. We never were in control. So it's just showing up a little bit more right now. So that said, I mean, it's the same with kids. So if a child is being bullied and they can't do something to stop the bullying, one of the best things we can do with kids is take them to volunteer, do service for someone else. We need to show them that their actions matter. So even though maybe this is still stressful over here or anxiety producing, they can do something kind, they can do service, they get their tank filled back up. And it's often not about eliminating stress, but bringing enough capacity. So it goes back again to demand capacity of the stress is always going to be there. We need it to adapt and grow and change, but we need the right amount, the right intensity, the right frequency, the right duration, just like physical exercise. And similarly, because you said movement, physical movement is so powerful. And so just kind of going back to the way that the brain is organized, we activate, the base of the brain first, and then in the midsection, and then up to the top of the brain. And so oftentimes we try to outthink our stress, and that is almost impossible. What we really need to do is outfeel or outsense. Like we have to go back to like bottom up processing. So if we move, if we eat, nourishing foods, if we laugh or play, if we use essential oils or tactical things, that's why I do so much with that. We cue the nervous system to actually calm the body enough to then quiet the mind. So the breath that we talked about, that exhalation. So just as another kind of simple framework people could imagine that you're recharging your brain literally from the bottom up, from sensing to feeling to thinking, so that you can make good choices. The breathing does the sensory part. The feeling positive emotion does the, kind of mid part of the brain to get that charged up. And now you can focus on taking action. But if you just say, here's the problem, I need to fix it, it's going to be hard for you to problem solve effectively. If you say, here's the problem, here's why the problem's there, and I appreciate that stress is trying to help me do that. I know that sounds like a big ask, but it's essentially assess, appreciate, adjust. So I assess what's happening. I appreciate that the stress is trying to help me, not hurt me. And then I figure out one simple thing that I can do. And I love that you said in the beginning, I'm always careful not to start with this because I feel like people will tune me out if I say this from the beginning, that stressing is a blessing when we know how to use it for good. So the stress reactions we have are not trying to hurt us, they're trying to help us. If we take a step back and learn from them and then make those, circuit break types of moves to release that energy and problem solve more effectively, that's where we will actually grow.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm really glad that you mentioned that it can sound insensitive. I've run into the same thing, or broach the topic with patients too early in the process and have them feel that it's insensitive, or friends or family. And so
they feel like it's a weakness, or like you're saying, well, just, get over it kind of thing, or stressing's good for you, or, it's feels just sometimes.
I would have to confess it's a pet peeve when I've had people try to encourage me to be strong or resilient over the years before hearing me. Yes. So I've always appreciated being heard. I hear you. I hear that you're suffering.
Yep.
And then after that, okay, how are you going to cope? I've also appreciated people saying, well, do you want to just be heard, or do you want feedback?
So what that does is it goes back to the base of the brain again, of safety, because that's really, we're hardwired for safety. So when you meet me where I need to be met, and you do connect with somebody, you can empathize with them, you can listen. I think so many of our tendencies is to fix, problem solve, get the person out, because we don't feel comfortable. So if you come to me with a situation, I'm going to feel it in my body. I'm going to want to take care of it, take care of you and stuff. I mean, that's a real skill set to develop, to be able to just sit with people in their experience and ask those questions. We can ask them of each other. What do you need most right now? What would be most helpful for you right now? We can ask them of ourselves even, you're feeling something, you notice that you're feeling stressed out and it's getting to be too much. Ask yourself what you need. Take a few deep breaths. Think about something you feel grateful for in the moment. It doesn't have to be anything big. And then just ask yourself, what do I really need right now? What's the smallest thing that I could do that would have a positive impact? And sometimes it's just getting new blood circulating. It's just standing up and moving around and stretching. Sometimes it's getting a massage, which is a big one for me, or a hot tub or a warm bath. Sometimes it needs to be physically nurturing for you. And other times it's just distraction. Watch a funny movie, write a thank you card to somebody. There's so many ways to shift our perspective. But again, I think we have to be safe, be calm, be quiet for a moment, and check in with ourselves and see what's going to be most helpful. And let ourselves feel that, feel what we feel.
Right.
Do that.
Right. Well, I want to be respectful of your time today. And so one of the things that I was hoping we would be able to get to, and I think we just did, so I'll just maybe explore it a little further, is that if somebody's watching this a year or two from now, they may try to take away more of the big picture. But if they watch it soon, it may be in the midst of the COVID-19 stuff. And so if they're feeling kind of flooded and overwhelmed, the thing that jumped out over our whole conversation was the most recent idea there to just slow down, become aware of what's happening, and then say, what do I need? And I like it that then it changes from moment to moment. It could be calling one's brother. It could be listening to a favorite song. It could be watching a funny show. It could be walking around the block or getting on the elliptical. It could be preparing a salad and putting it in the fridge just to know that it's waiting there for later. It's a very sort of fluid, organic feeling of what do I need right now. And sometimes I think it's also very, very powerful for people that so maybe if you reflect again on, a tactical toolkit for people just day to day right now, and if I've gotten some of it wrong, please correct me. But also in the notes for today's show, did you say self-compassion might be the single most important thing that people need? Should we tie that in?
Yeah, actually, that was great because I was going to, because as you were starting to kind of wrap things up, there's that part of me that always wants to jump out and go, don't forget self-compassion for myself, because it's been a game changer for me. And I really started focusing on it more last year, going through another bout of depression where I was just so exhausted from the hustle. I was like, I'm just working so hard and I feel like I'm banging my head against the wall and I just don't know where this is all leading. So like, I just was so tired, and I stumbled across Kristen Neff's research and her work. And there's many people now doing self-compassion, but essentially it's that notion of, self-esteem really comes from comparing ourselves to other people. So it's like, I'm better than, and especially when we look at children, you're doing better than everyone in school. Self-compassion is we're all in this together. We're all human. We all suffer. And there's a gentleness to that I think is really important. And you kind of touched on it already by saying that we need to be heard, and we need to do that with, even ourselves. And I think that ties into what I wanted to say about kind of training your brain to be different and to use stress differently, is that we need to be proactive and reactive. And so I think as much as it's fluid and we kind of ask ourselves in the moment what we need, if you haven't already been trying to figure out what you need, or if you haven't been practicing different things, it's going to be really hard to find something, especially when you need it most. So I think that, being proactive, even after this conversation, for people who are listening or watching, to say, okay, there was a lot of stuff in there, and I'm thinking this one I've done before and it worked, or I've been thinking about trying this, or maybe Heidi said self-compassion, that feels like that might resonate with me, so let me go check that out. I want to encourage everybody to spend a little bit of time, and also don't assume that one teacher has all the answers. I mean, we all practice very differently. We have different styles, tones. I do this whole beach brain meditation that layers in all of these different sensory integrations. And for me, I mean, I've got sea glass next to me. I've got the color blue going on. I have water around me as much as I can. So that works for me. But for other people, there's going to be a different kind of rhythm or feel that they want to find. And I do think it's important to explore what's out there. And so what I would suggest to create a better rhythm for yourself is to think about kind of three main things. Number one is what you do in the morning to plug in to what matters to you. So within the first hour of waking up, how are you nudging your nervous system into a more optimal state? And that could be a lot of things we've talked about. Do you listen to music? Like when I'm really struggling with my own mental health, it's almost always music or essential oils, oftentimes both. And I'll have a playlist. So I actually have a uplift playlist of things that make me feel more positive. I have another one that's kind of like a calm down playlist. I have a dance it out playlist, have some different things, but you have to proactively put those together so that in the moment that you need them. So if in the morning, let's say you have a song, there's a song right now, I think it came out last year. It's called Rainbow by, I think it's Casey Musgraves. Every time I hear it, I just stop and I just am so grateful. And so I'll listen to that in the morning and I think about that sensation that I want to carry with me during the day, do some breathing, think about who I want to be before I think about what I have to do, which is circuit breaking what we typically do in checking our phone. So morning plug-in, super important. What you choose to do, try some different things. And I've got, resources we can share to help people figure out what that is. And then in the evening, how do you unplug? How do you unwind? I'm sure you see a lot of people with sleep challenges, which is such a big problem because we're flatlining with stress all day long and we're not oscillating and rhythmic in our patterns. So at least an hour before bed, what are you doing to prime your brain to be able to sleep? And again, it could be music, essential oils. It could be stretching, warm baths, hot tea, all the things that I say are common sense, but not common practice. Do those things and pick one. Here's my morning anchor and here's my evening anchor. And then how are you going to recharge? When are you going to do it? Put it into your calendar at least 3 times during the day. You can do them around mealtime if you want to, which will help you digest your food. You could do it in the transition between, work and home. Even if you're working from home, like all of us are right now, I could still say, okay, it's this time, my work is done, and I'm going to sit and do a prayer, or I'm going to read a chapter of a book, or I'm going to color a mandala, or, there's so many options, but what are the things? And I would suggest everyone kind of come up with what I call your recharge toolkit. What do you do in the morning? What do you do in the evening? And what do you do during the day? And those daytime recharges should not be considered optional, because your energy is not optional. So it's like you have to change the story that says taking care of yourself is taking care of your business. Taking care of yourself is taking care of your family, because we have to put our oxygen mask on first. And everyone says that, but hardly anybody actually acts like it's true. So watch your patterns. And I know one of the resources that I make available to people is that I have a recharge toolkit handout, and there's guided meditations and different essential oil blends. And I just kind of take the stuff that I've stumbled into that's worked really well for me to give people a way to kind of, again, play around with what might be a good combination and a good rhythm for them.
That's just so cool. Getting to hear that summary kind of gives me this electric feeling hearing it distilled that much. And I'm thankful to get to hear it summarized that way. And I'm thankful for people to get a distilled, compact footprint to that information so that they can kind of be tactical and strategic if they're feeling a little stuck, or if they just need to advance their practice. One thing that I think is so neat about the time period that you and I work in is that people can access this remotely. Yeah. And just in talking with you briefly today, I get the feeling that it would be terrific to do this in a process-oriented fashion. So if you would please share with us, I believe it's a foundation course that people can do if they wanted. How does that work if people want to do your foundations class or continue and develop mastery in these domains you're describing?
I have more ways to hang out with me than I think anyone should actually have. I mean, it's kind of funny because, the community we hang out with and the people we hang out with, we're always trying to think about how do we get our content to people and help more people. And I love creating things like that. In fact, I spent probably 2 hours this morning creating new beach brain meditation videos with images and mantras. And it's just like, that's really fun for me. Then the challenge is, how do I get this to people? And my passion is really actually helping other practitioners learn how to teach other people or lead workshops. Most of my education is around that space and teaching other thought leaders, even HR professionals, because I do a lot of work in the corporate space. So there's a lot of ways to find content, and depending on, what we have in the show notes for people, I have courses on LinkedIn, I have courses on my website. Because of what's going on right now, I can say that there's been some last minute adjustments to some of my programming because I'm really rallying together a virtual first responder community. So we are the people like yourself who are already active on being online and have these tools online and can really support people while the rest of the world figures out how to do that. So there's more information coming out all the time. Right now, what I tell people best thing to do is go to my website, which is HeidiHanna.com. I have a whole team like redoing it because of this pivot that we're all making right now to make things more accessible. And also, I'm most active on Facebook and LinkedIn. So people can follow me on Facebook. And what I'm doing right now, just because it's easy and fast, is I'm just putting all of my free webinars and events right there on the events page. So I'll make sure, you guys, I know, have that information for the show notes, but anything else that people want access to, the Recharge Toolkit, I've got a bunch of ebooks for people. I really love just sharing as much as I can with people. I want to make it really practical. I think that's one of the challenges sometimes is we have so much information and we want to share that with people, but if we don't simplify it so that they can apply it, we do a disservice. So I appreciate your approach to doing that as well, and certainly your style and your sense of safety that you give, I could see how clients would feel really comfortable and safe having conversations about their health with you. And that's a real blessing, because we don't all have that, especially in today's day and age when it's like in and out, kind of stuff. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for the positive feedback. And I ended up finding part of my recharge was work-life balance, that I needed to set some boundaries so that the cobbler did have shoes. So
we have a big, we're talking massive epidemic for anyone happens to be listening to this who is in the medical profession. We talk a lot about veterans, with post-traumatic stress and things like that. And I believe there's 22 veterans a day who are taking their own lives. Just recently, the statistics went higher for people in the medical profession, because people are really burning out because of that, because we're people who are healers and we want to take care of everybody else, and we push and push and push. And unfortunately, we also are often very sensitive, so we're absorbing the pain and the suffering of the people around us. So important for practitioners in particular to really practice self-compassion, loving kindness when we can't take care of everybody, is just to, do the best we can to get into that flow state, like you said. And I would say make the self-care mandatory, because just like we know with parents and their kids, patients are going to model our behavior. And I hate to say that my worst, quote unquote, corporate clients are those in healthcare.
Well, it's a good, perhaps global note to wrap up on, in addition to just another.
Sounds like a downer, though. Let's wrap up on something better.
Well, my thought there was that it's our cup spilling over. Yeah. And so we look around and we witness the intensity and the suffering. And because I've run both sides of this experiment, it's not conjectural for me. I've done the doctor burning the candle at both ends because of family practice, delivering babies, being up all night in hospital. And I did it when I was in my 20s. So it felt like, just throw on the Superman cape and go, go, go. And then in my 30s, I saw that I wasn't Superman. And there was going to be a cost to this. And there was a depletion and an irritability emerging, which was clearly a precursor to burnout. And then I was really struck by a really significant period of time before it fully coalesced in my brain that to help others, my cup had to be full. And then last year, when I got ready for this new dimension of my practice, offering telemedicine all over Alaska and to people that come in from outside of Alaska and establish care, so expanding my practice, Dan Kalish said during my business class from the Kalish Institute, he said, you need to be living all of the things that you're expecting and asking. And living them fully, 100%. You need to be a living embodiment of this radiance that you're promoting. And I thought of all my functional medicine heroes, and they're radiant. It's like it's like somebody hit the floodlights when they come in the room. And I thought, okay, I'm going to take that next step and ride my bike to work and get to bed a little earlier and keep turning those knobs and set a few extra boundaries. And I think it did take some courage because of a model of the. One model of the MD is the sort of just go, 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 go. And I felt like, well, that's not the functional medicine MD in the Kalish model. So
there's a couple points in that I would love to just encourage people on, yourself, myself, all of us included. One resource would be, if people haven't seen it, I would really recommend watching Jill Bolte Taylor's TED Talk, or reading her book, or watching her on Oprah. Her talk is called My Stroke of Insight. So she was a neuroscientist or neurologist, I can't remember exactly, who had a stroke. And because she knew the brain so well, she knew exactly what was happening as it was happening. It's a fascinating story. But essentially what happened is she lost the capacity in the part of her brain that could actually problem solve and kind of know what was going on, names, numbers, all of that kind of stuff. But what she felt so clearly was energy. And what she says, and what I've always said as well, I think as a highly sensitive person, is that we are responsible for the energy we bring to the time that we have. So as we're living in this exact moment, we know there's a lot of contagious things happening. Stress is highly contagious. It's more contagious than any virus, any flu. We get it over a text message, over the TV, whatever. But so is positivity. So when we think about that energy, what is the energy we want to bring to the time? And in fact, the quality of our connections are way more based on energy than time. So we've all been places where we spent a lot of time and no energy, and it wasn't really effective. We didn't learn anything, we didn't connect with the person. And we've all had those moments, like you're saying, Rob, where it's like, I'm talking with someone and they just exude that. And it's like, it could be 5 minutes. So a client could come to you in 5 minutes and feel heard for the first time in their life. That's an extraordinary experience. Or they can sit with someone for an hour who's checking their phone and looking over their shoulder and making them feel unimportant. So I think all of us, if we can just keep that in mind, that yes, we feel like there's not enough time to get it all done, but it's really not about the time that we have. It's about the energy we bring to the time that we have. And we can do something about that, even in the midst of chaotic circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
That felt much more uplifting to me.
There we go. Yeah, a wonderful close. Thank you so much, Dr. Heidi Hanna. What a blast talking with you. I can see why you're that person people just want to talk to forever if they could. So it's a great blessing.
Well, I appreciate you. Good luck getting through all of this. And thank you for all the great work you're doing.
Have a great rest of your day. Take care. Seaworthy exists for people to overcome their health challenges and be fully vital. Please consider subscribing, giving us a 5-star review if we've earned it, and going to our website podcast tab for any questions or comments you'd like to share with us. Thanks.